Hi, Adam. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'd like to start the show by asking you about your journey as an investor. Could you walk us through the main stages of your growth?
Yes, stage one was the stage where my mom married my stepdad, and he already owned self-storage units, apartments, single family, condos, land. So that was like really phase one is just seeing that it was a kind of like a normal thing, and me thinking that it would probably be something that I would get into. Phase two is the fun phase, the most exciting phase of all, and that's where I was thrown to the wolves. And this is because my stepdad was teaching me and training me that I had to do this, and I never did it. And so while I was in college, he bought me a piece of land, and then his accountant, his bookkeeper, his CPA told him that he had to make me pay for it. So here I was, a college student. I could barely pay for books, and all of a sudden I had to pay for this piece of land that I didn't even know that I was ready for. So that was me being thrown to the wolves. And about 2 years later, I sold that same piece of property. About a year and a half later, sold that same piece of property for 12,000% higher than I bought it for. And so that was really phase two. Phase three was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and learning that Robert Kiyosaki made his wealth not with single family but multifamily. And so I became a property manager for apartments. I started managing apartments in 2007. And this was, this phase was essential to my growth because it helped me to learn how to manage apartments. Back then, I don't think that they had anyone teaching you how to buy an apartment. So I thought the only way for me to learn is actually be the property manager. And then the next phase would be when I decided to start syndicating my deals. So I started buying apartments in 2008 after managing them. And that next phase, I think we're on phase four, was where I decided I'm going to use other people's money. So I started syndicating apartments in 2016. So now I'm partnered in. I don't own these all by myself. I have partners in 1,400 apartments, which is enough cash flow to pay my bills, keep my expenses, get me out of the rat race. And so that was the fourth phase, is to start syndicating, and it helped a lot.
Thank you. What are some of the main lessons you've learned as a property manager?
The main lessons that I learned while managing other people's properties and then managing my own, here's a big one for your listener. If you have a really soft heart, if you're the type of person that just wants other people to be happy, you're a people pleaser, or you care about people, or you don't want to be the bad guy, you might have some trouble. You might have a lot of troubles managing your own properties. So the lesson that I learned when I was managing other people's properties, the owner had certain rules that I was supposed to do. And so I had to do a background check. I had to check credit. I had to call references. When it was mine, and it was 2008 and kind of hard to fill an apartment anyway, I skipped all those steps. And I was like, it's okay. I trust you. I've learned to trust but verify. But back then it was like, I'm a good person, so everybody else must be a good person. I just trust you because your word, my word's my bond, your word must be your bond. And I learned the hard way that you have to vet people, you have to get a contract signed. You shouldn't let your friends or your family stay in your units. And you should probably, especially if you have a soft heart like me, just hire it out. I was nervous. I was like, there's no way I'm paying 10%. That's like, because I had a multifamily, and 10% was a lot of money. And I was like, there's no way I'm paying all that to someone else. I'll just do it. And that was a huge mistake. So managing your own properties is difficult. You need to have systems in place. You need to verify everything. You got to call references. Another lesson on references is that some people, when they give you references, they're actually giving you the phone number to their best friend, or to their aunt, or to their uncle, or to their mom, where they're like, Mom, can you just say that I paid you rent? And mom's like, I want you out of my effing house. So yes, I'll say that you paid me rent, just because I'll do anything for you. And so it's interesting to think like that their friends and their family are lying for them, saying that they're good residents, good tenants, they pay on time, that they have a certain job. And so, you learn a lot. What else did I learn from managing my own property? Here's that was all a big lesson on what to watch out for. This is more of a lesson on what is possible. My first lesson was to scare you away from doing it, and this lesson is to inspire you to do it. On the 18-plex that I was managing, there was 3 floors and 6 apartments across. So it was 6 and then 6 and then the top level as well. And the owner of the property, because I was just the property manager, the owner told me to do these few things, and he said it would work. And so I just did it, blind faith, right? The owner told me that I needed to switch out the carpet and baseboards. So I want to go away from these rubber rolled baseboards that are rubber, that last a million years probably. I doubt they would last, but to get those out, but to put in big old 4-inch pieces of wood with a beautiful trim. Okay, so I switched out the baseboards. I switched out the carpet. All of this was cheap, by the way, very inexpensive. And then the next thing he wanted me to do was to switch out the linoleum in the kitchen for tile. And so I decided to do that. And because I was doing the work, instead of hiring a tile person, I wasn't getting paid $3 or $5 per square foot. I was getting paid $10 or $12 per hour. So I switched those out, and then I in the bathroom, I took out the subway tile and put in travertine tile on the walls. Those were the only things I did. The rents were between $500 and $600 when I started doing that to each of the units, and they went up to about $915 per unit. Well, here's the amazing thing. When all we did was switch out some flooring and what the walls look like, and it was very inexpensive, just a couple grand, and that's it. We made a couple grand every few months. But the best part is that Reed, the owner, in 1 year, he sold that 18-plex, which is a small apartment. I own some apartments, or I'm partnered in some apartments that are 400 units. But so imagine doing this on a scale. But with the 18 unit, it's amazing. He put $1 million in his pocket in 1 year of utilizing my OPT, my time. He utilized other people's time, and he sat back and he made $1 million doing it. And I made 10 or 12 bucks an hour. That was huge. I couldn't believe that he made $1 million that year with none of his own time. So I think that's another huge lesson is what you need to do to apartments. A lot of people are over improving them. They're putting granite tile. You don't need granite. You just need to switch the paint to 2-tone or 3-tone. You just need to make the carpet fresh and clean, and do a small upgrade like tile in the bathroom or in the kitchen, and you're going to be able to attract a much better tenant who pays, instead of $500 or $600, they're really paying $915, and base that on a cap rate, $1 million a net of improvement in just a year. It's amazing.
Wow, yeah, the power of forced appreciation and leveraging other people's time and over other people's money.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your own? So you said at some point you had before you raised capital for your deals and you did syndication. You had your own portfolio. Can you tell us about that? What was your first property?
Yeah, good. So the first triplex that I bought in 2008, so I went straight into multifamily. I had a piece of land, and then the next deal that I bought was multifamily, and that's what I did until 2015. The triplex, I what's interesting is I still used OPM for that one. Um, so I was planning on, I had just a little bit of money. I think I had $30,000 or $40,000 in my account at the time, but definitely enough for the 3% FHA loan. Because I was only going to need like 10 or 12,000 to buy a small multifamily. So I had plenty of cash in the bank to do an FHA loan, and that first triplex in 2008. My business, I had a handyman company, and I was doing well. I was making netting around 20,000 each month, and just I was still in college, and I felt really good because some people in my college, they made 20,000 per year, and so I was doing pretty well for myself, and bought this triplex. But as I went from bank to bank to bank, I kept getting the same answer. I kept getting them tell me that I would have to have, 1 second, I need to switch my headphones. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Sorry, these were dying. Okay. 3, 2, 1. So I was going from bank to bank to bank, and each bank kept telling me that I would have needed 2 years of tax history in order to have a loan. What's funny is just a couple of weeks before I was applying for a loan, they were allowing stated loans, no doc loans. They call them ninja, no job, no income, ninja, no income, no job. And but at the end of 2008, they got smart. They got really smart, and it affected me because I couldn't get an FHA loan, so I wasn't even able to go to a bank. So what I did as a handyman, I was talking to one of my clients who had me do a lot of work on his property. And so I ended up asking him if he wanted a partner. And he said yes. And so what he did is he purchased the triplex, a 3-unit building, for about $375,000. And then he made a loan out to me. So he became the bank. Since I couldn't use a actual bank, he became my bank. He made a loan out to me, and I purchased that property that way. Since then, I used strategic partners. And so what I would do is I would buy a property. I would partner with somebody who had money, but they didn't want to find deals, and they didn't want to have to manage deals. And they would come after me, and they would say, hey, can I bring some capital to you? And it's funny, I never realized that people would actually do that, but they do it all the time. Like, people with money, they search out somebody who they could tell has some experience, some knowledge, who's done it before. And so I partnered with this guy named Steve later on, and Steve and I did some tax deed investing. So what we would do is we would buy properties in Florida. And so he would use his capital, and I would research the properties, and I would hire somebody to go boots on ground to look at them, take pictures, and give us comps and everything. And then we would buy a property on tax deed, and we would flip it. So it would be all 100% Steve's money. So we would buy a property, and then 8 days later, we would sell it for double what we paid for it. And we did that a couple of times. Other things that we did, which were awesome, is we found these properties, these 3 houses in a small town called Youngstown, Ohio. Northeast Ohio got majorly affected when steel went out, and the town got really depressed. But there's a few pockets of good neighborhoods with good people. We bought 3 houses, and I think we spent about 15 grand or something, like, for 3 different houses. Very motivated seller. And we ended up, those houses appraised for $25,000 a piece. So, which was just $75,000. But what I did is now we first used Steve's money to buy it. And then I went to a private lender. Her name is Camila. And I went to Camila and I said, "Hey, Camila, I just got back from, I just got this appraisal back, and these houses are worth, $75,000. And I wondered if you would want to put about a 60% loan against them." So Camila ended up lending us $45,000, so 15 a piece. So we had 10 grand equity in all 3. And then we just kept doing that. Like, Steve and I would take that money, which was more than we started with, and we would buy more properties. And then I would go to a private money lender and I would ask them to do like a 50, 60, 75% loan on the property value as a private note, and usually at 12% interest, which is easy to calculate because we just do 1% a month. So on the 45,000, we pay her $450 every month. But we're making a ton more than that. We're making about $1,600 a month. So it's easy to pay that, right? So that's how we built our portfolio, still with other people's money, both my partner Steve and different private lenders like Beth and Camila and a couple others that we had partnered with. We did a few flips with Steve's money and then a hard money lender. We did one flip with just a private money lender, lent 115% of the condo value at a Denver condo. It was only 200 grand. And so everything that I've really done, I've done with other people's money, except for a few of the apartments that I've partnered in. I'm a limited partner in a few deals. And so it's like when I have enough money to buy a car, I don't want a car. I want cash flow. So I will invest in somebody else's syndication. So that kind of gives you some answers of what I've done to kind of build the portfolio.
Okay, thank you. And so you talk a lot about OPM, and I'm curious, and I think I know that today in your syndications, you're the money guy. You raise capital. It's part of your task. Can you tell us some of your secrets on how you do that?
For sure. Let's break it down let's break raising capital down into 3 main phases, 3 big phases. Now there's a lot of steps within every phase, but the first phase is getting people to know who you are. Very important phase, because I promise you, if only 10 people know who you are, the absolute max that could ever like you or trust you or do business with you or invest in your deals is max of 10. And you'd have to be doing really well to get all 10, right? So we need to think, how do we get more people to know who we are? This is the main first phase. And so this is basically, you can think of it like, how do we get people on our list? How do we get people to come after us? So this first phase is branding your company, branding yourself, being who you are, not trying to wear a suit. Like I'm recording this wearing a baseball cap, a trucker cap, and a t-shirt, my Rogue exercise shirt. And I'm not trying to wear an Italian suit, 3-piece suit or anything like that, right? And so it's because I don't feel comfortable in a suit. I got to be who I am. other people who love suits, they should wear their suits. So part of your brand, part of it, who you are, is using the normal language that you use, talking about the things that you talk about, enjoying CrossFit like I do, or wine like I do. And it's very important to think of this. You have to attract the right people, but you have to repel the other people. And people are like, oh no, I don't want to repel anyone. They say to themselves, I want all the money I can get. But if you try to talk to everyone, if you try to please everyone, you're really going to please nobody. For instance, if you go around saying, oh, sports are great, I like things like football, nobody's really going to take you seriously. But if you say something like, I am a diehard Broncos fan, now you're going to start to get some ears to perk up. Oh, Broncos, I like Broncos, but you also repel a few people like, nope, it's only Raiders or it's only Cowboys for me. So you got to be like that. You have to be so much yourself that you're attracting the right people and detracting or repelling the wrong. So some things that I do is I have 2 kids, right? I've got 2 young boys, and I go out and I have fun with them. And I want to attract people to passively invest in my deals who love families. You know, I drive a Honda Pilot. I'm in it now, actually, while we're recording. I drive a Honda Pilot. And there's much more expensive cars out there. There's all sorts of Aston Martins, and I could find a way to afford any car that I wanted to. But I am a Honda man, right? I like having a family car. I like having awesome gas mileage. I like being conservative. And so the passive investors that chase me down, they want somebody who's conservative. They want somebody who's thinking, oh, this is a family car, great gas mileage, very inexpensive to repair this car. And so I talk about my Honda. I do that a lot. And then some passive investors who all they want is massive amounts of money and to retire next week and have unrealistic expectations, they're going to chase other people that are more flashy, that wear the watches and the suits and the Aston Martins. But the conservative investors who just want to grow conservatively and spend time with their family and have a well-balanced life, they chase me. And so it doesn't matter who you are. You don't have to be a family person to have this first phase 1, the branding. You don't have to be a family person to get value out of this. Anything you are. If you have tattoos, if you swear, like and cuss all the time, you just got to own it. You have to be you, because you're going to attract good people. So in the branding phase, we have 3 main things. Once we identify our avatar, that's the perfect passive investor. And to me, it's an engineer, because engineers, they get Hondas. Most engineers, even though they could figure out how to afford an Aston Martin or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or whatever, they get Hondas because that's the type of person that they are. My avatar is an engineer because I resonate with them. And so you need to understand your avatar. You have to understand who is your perfect passive investor. Remember, you're not speaking to everyone. You're the Broncos fan amidst all these other sports fans out there. And then you'll want to do these 3 things that I kind of started to mention before. You want to be on social media and talk about your wine that you love, or the food or the restaurants or the travel that you enjoy, or the family time or your other hobbies. You want to have a thought leadership platform like you have, like this podcast, for instance, is a thought leadership platform. I love thought leadership platforms, and it's one of the 3 key parts. It's the 3 pillars to attracting more capital. Your social media presence, your thought leadership platform, and your live events. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but if you want to be able to raise millions of dollars like we do, we've literally raised many, many millions. And it's because of these 3 things: what I do on social, what I do with my thought leadership, my own podcast, I have one too, and what I do with my live events, the Raising Money Summit, my meetup groups that I host, some workshops that I host. These are the three key pieces. Can I tell you why they're so important? Because if you miss phase one, then the next two parts that I share with you won't matter at all. So if you have a social media presence, you're able to funnel people to the most important two things you have: your thought leadership and your live events. Without a social media presence, you will have live events and a podcast, but nobody will listen. Nobody will attend. You have to be able to market it. You have to be able to tell people that it's there. Most of the people who start a podcast never get anyone to listen to the podcast because nobody knows that the podcast is there. They're not marketing. So my suggestion is to do that on your social media. Among the other things that you're talking about, wine and CrossFit or yoga or hiking or biking or food or travels, whatever it is that you love, while you're talking about all of those things, you also want to talk about your work, what you do. So if you're raising private equity, like for deals like we do, every now and again, I'll jump on and I will say, hey, we have an apartment community that we're thinking about that partnering with other people on. If you're interested in partnering on one of these apartments, let me know. I'd be happy to have that conversation. So I call it the jab, jab, right hook. Jab, jab, meaning like if you're on LinkedIn, you give value, you give value, you give value. And then the right hook is you invite them to your event, or you invite them to listen to your podcast, or you invite them to passively invest in a deal. If you do there is some legalities around raising money. And so we probably won't get into 506B or 506C. Just make sure that you talk to an attorney on how to do that, because we do it legally each time. And some people don't. So anyway, we'll pass that. That's why having a social media is important. Now with your thought leadership, here's the main purpose around a thought leadership. What you're really trying to do is get other people to talk about you when you're not in the room. A book is a thought leadership platform. And by writing a book, somebody might suggest it or recommend it to others. And they might talk, oh, you've got to read chapter 5 in his book. Oh, you've got to listen to episode 30 of his podcast. Oh, you've got to watch episode 99 of her YouTube channel, right? So you got to get people to start talking about you. Oh, I love when Adam talks about meetups. That's in episode 40, 42, 44, 46, and 48 of his show, or something like that. Or if you really want to know how to analyze deals best, you need to listen to Adam Adams's episode 242 with Neil Bawa, who goes into deep detail on that, right? So you want people to talk about you when you're not even in the room. You might be asleep. You might be on vacation, enjoying CrossFit, enjoying some wine, and enjoying travels, and other people are talking about you. So that's why thought leadership is so important. But you won't have a strong thought leadership platform. You won't sell a lot of books. You won't have a lot of listeners unless you mention it on your Facebook. Then the third thing is live events. And I don't want your audience to get confused or stressed. You don't have to have a conference. I host conferences each year, and they have a ton of people. I'm not talking, you don't have to have 600 plus people in a room to have a live event. You could just host a meetup group. You could just have a workshop, a private workshop. You only invite passive investors. You help them be safer passive investors, etc. But you got to have something. Maybe it's just a dinner. Maybe you and a significant other goes to dinner with a potential passive investor and a significant other. You got to be live and in person They don't have to be called events, but you have to see people and shake their hands and break bread with people, because that's what really gets them to start really truly trusting you. So the thought leadership makes them know you. The social media maybe makes them like you, and the live events makes them trust you. Your passive investors. So that's how you can raise massive amounts of money. So this is all the first phase. It's branding yourself, building your online brand, getting in front of the right people, making sure that more than 10 people know who you are, because you definitely want more than 10 people investing in your deals, especially if you want to raise a lot of capital. The next phase is how you manage your investors. And so in this phase, you got to be in front of them. You have to have an email address with them. You have to have some type of CRM. You have to add value to them constantly on the email, in touching base. This is, I'm going quick on phase 2, but that's how do you manage your list? The first phase is how do you brand yourself and get people on your list. The second phase is how you manage your list. And the last phase is how you call the capital. How do you ask for money? I can give some tips. If we have time, I can give some tips.
Easy, yeah.
All right. So within the psychology, there's a few things that are hard and fast. Now, I've read some really good books that are more eloquent than I am in expressing the art of influence. So there is a couple books by Oren Klaff, and there's a couple books by, why can't I remember his name right now? Oren Klaff, by the way, ORENKLAFF. He has Pitch Anything, and another one where I'd have to pull him up, but you just look up his name. You'll see 2 really good books. I read them both, and I learned a lot from each of them. And then on Robert Cialdini, I read 2 books. One is Persuasion, and the other one is Influence. The art of one's influence, and one is persuasion. Not a typo. I'm not trying to say persuasion. It's persuasion, ahead of time, right? So these 4 books would really get you started. I think you should read all 4 if you want the psychology to really work. There's a few things to think about, though. When you are offering an opportunity, you have to believe in the opportunity. That part's important. I did door-to-door sales, and I remember that if I believed that somebody should buy and ought to buy and would buy, they usually would. But what was weird is if I thought they might not buy, they didn't buy. And so you, as somebody who's going to raise a lot of capital, you have more impact on if somebody gives you the money or not. It's really strange, but this is how it works. If you believe, then you have voice inflections that change. You have different facial expressions that change. When you are passionate, when you believe, when you have a strong conviction of something, it translates through you to that other person, even subconsciously. You'll say things, the way that you'll act, but if you believe it, they believe it. And it's the weirdest thing. So that's really the main part, is you have to know that your offer is amazing. If you think to yourself, oh man, I need to raise money or else I'm not going to be able to close on this deal, and then I'm going to be embarrassed, then you're already thinking of everything wrong. You're coming from a position of absolute weakness, and human beings are kind of like bees and dogs. They smell the fear. And so if you come across like, I'm not sure if they should do this, and I need this or else I'm not going to be able to do this, it comes across to them like he's needy or she's needy, and I shouldn't invest my money with this person. That's how it comes across. However, if you know that you're offering an amazing opportunity that they can't find anywhere else, then, and you can show them that this is a limited time and not everybody's going to be able to invest with you, and that when you put out these deals that go really, really fast because everybody wants them, they're going to realize that this is a once in a life opportunity. They've got to be a part of it. So that's what I would suggest, is first understanding the psychology between your own. When you understand the psychology between your ears of how you have to believe, you have to I guess that, what's the word for it? They say believe in your product. Regardless, it is very important. So that's just part of it. Now let's just talk about a couple other ways for you to actually influence what other people do and what other people decide to do. Here's a few things that you can do. Number one, if you show scarcity, write it down. If you show scarcity, like this is only 10 people are going to be able to invest in this. All I can handle on this deal is 500,000, and that's only 10 people at 50,000 each, and so it's going to fill up fast. And if you can show scarcity like that, like there's a limited amount of times, a limited amount of time to invest, or a limited amount of people that can invest, that's already going to make people want it and desire it. And you'll know this because I was just looking at vehicles. I told you I bought a Honda Pilot not too long ago. I was also looking at the Toyota Sequoia, which could fit enough people for my whole family, because I got 6 people that we need to travel, right? So I was looking at the bigger vehicles. So the Sequoia, I didn't want just any Sequoia, by the way. I wanted the Army Green TRD Pro. That's the only one I would have had, because what's really funny is the salesperson told me that it was the only one of its kind in Colorado. And I was like, well, then I have to have it. I have to have the only one, because it's scarcity, okay? And so when you can use that scarcity for your own benefit in an honest way, I'm not saying to deceive anybody, but if you're only raising 500 grand and it's only limited to 10 people at 50,000 each, you've got to say that, okay? So that's the first one, is scarcity. The second one that I want to show and share with your audience is something that is social proof. And the way that we do that is to show the passive investor that others do this too. Other people like them also invest in our deals. And so we use social proofing to show that. And don't use this to be manipulative. Don't do it to lie. Just be honest about it. But when you do, it's going to affect your passive investor very, very well. So you'll say something like, you'll be talking to them and they might say something like, yeah, I'm an engineer. No way, that's so cool. My biological father, I have a stepdad, my bio dad was an electrical engineer. What kind of engineer are you? And then you start getting into things. And then you say something like, man, engineers are one of the top people to be invested into deals like this. In fact, I have a few engineers already investing in this deal, because engineers know that that it's a conservative, safe way compared to some other more risky things to be able to grow your portfolio. And so this attracts a lot of engineers. And then you might even say, you remind me of Sarah May. She's an engineer. She's an aerospace engineer, just like you. And she started getting involved into multifamily about 4 years ago. And I'm just so surprised at how many engineers love the security that they get when they are investing into a syndication like this, something like that. You know, you want to use social proofing. Other ways to do that would be to say like that others have already invested. So it's funny with the psychology, when you talk to an investor, a lot of times they say, well, how many people do you have? And so if you can say it truthfully, you might say, well, we've raised a little over $1 million, so we only have a couple 100,000 left, or we've already raised 400,000, so we only have about 100,000 left. That's going to be just 2 more people. So that's another way to say social proofing. You don't want to say it like we've raised $1 million. Like you don't want to be a like a salesperson, right? Like a used car salesman or whatever that you have in your idea when you think of a salesperson, like overly flamboyant, overly excited, overly like whatever. But you can just say we've raised a little over $1 million. We have a couple 100,000 left. That's why I'm calling you, is because I think that you might want to be a part of this. So that's using social proof so that passive investor understands that other people also want to do this. That's why Amazon's so popular, by the way. Amazon is popular because of the ratings and reviews. It's not just because you can buy things in your underwear from the comfort of your own home. It's also because you can look up the reviews. You don't have to guess at it. You can see that, oh, everybody loves this product. That's social proofing. That makes you feel better about going ahead and buying it. Same thing, like, why did I buy a Honda, by the way? Because it has it's been on the road. They have a reputation of staying on the road longer than almost any other car out there. You know, Toyotas and Hondas are, they last a long time. But I wanted the social proof of that. I wanted to look that up. And when other people showed me the data, I said, oh, well, then I want a Honda too, because I had to go with social proofing before I bought this car. So that's just another part. Others are, there's so many more, but I think if you think about the psychology between your own ears, if you think about utilizing scarcity and utilizing some social proofing, that will be a significant piece for you to be able to raise more capital. I will say one more thing is that the fortune is always in the follow-up. Everyone says that when you're a wholesaler and you're trying to buy houses for a low price, you only make that money when you stay in front of the people for a long time. And so when I say fortunes in the follow-up, yes, it goes back to you hosting a podcast. Yes, it goes back to you being active on social media. Yes, it goes back to you continuously having events or seeing people in person. But it also happens that after you've run a webinar to raise $2 or $3 million just for one deal, that you might not have all of the money committed right away, or it might be committed, but not in the bank yet. It's now become your job to follow up with all of the investors. You might follow up and say, hey, I noticed that you signed up for the webinar. Did you get a chance to attend the webinar? And do you have any questions? So that's a form of follow-up. Another form of follow-up is, hey, it looks like you committed to doing this. And by the way, here's another psychology part. People will, if people commit to doing something, you can use that to keep them to maintain, because most human beings, we need to be consistent. If we have a commitment, we need to be consistent. It's funny, like, I hate to talk politics, but I'm going to. There was some people that that voted for Donald Trump. Totally fine. I'm not going to speak pro or negative against. I'm not going to speak either way myself. But there were some people that voted for him, and then they found out that, you know, he had a pretty bad reputation with women, and that would normally bother them. But because they voted for him, they defend him. It's not because he didn't do it. It's specifically because we need to be consistent. And if we voted, we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to say that we're wrong. And so we kind of blind ourselves to some of the things that we learn, right? And it works for all things. It works for this Honda. This car that I'm sitting in right now recording this episode, I will continue to build up the Honda brand and find reasons why I didn't buy that Toyota Sequoia, right? Because I need to be consistent with myself. When I tell people that I'm a CrossFitter, I can't just go and switch to yoga because that isn't consistent. when I vote for somebody, or when I say that I'm a Republican or a Democrat, it's difficult to go against that because that makes us inconsistent. So that's why it's so difficult for humans after they voted for somebody, or after they've said I lean left or I lean right. It's extremely difficult psychologically for them to ever go to the other side. It's so funny how powerful that is. But how do we use that for us when raising money? If somebody says if somebody says, yeah, I want to do 50, then we use that language to them, because we know that they need to be consistent in the things that they say. And so you'll give them a call and say, hey, Sarah, thank you so much for attending the webinar. I saw that you have selected that you were going to be putting 50,000 into the deal. That's awesome. And then how do I help you to do that? Right. And so I'll use things like, when somebody says, hey, I'm not going to invest in that deal anymore, I will literally write an email that says, I know that you committed to doing the 50, and that you wanted to do the 50. And so I just wanted to find out what it was, what might have come up that would make you change your mind. What's so weird about this is they generally will end up investing because they want to stay consistent. It's such a powerful thing. Yeah, I've been talking for a long time, so you ask any questions and I'll try to keep my answers short for now on.
No, that was great. And you're the specialist of capital raise, so it's really nice that you would tell us in such detail how you do it. Okay. So out of the different social media you use, like Facebook, you've talked about podcasts, you've talked about meetup groups, events you organize. Where would you say you get the most investors that end up investing with you?
I have raised more money from my meetup than any other single platform. My meetup group, we meet weekly every Thursday, except for Thanksgiving. We meet weekly at lunch every Thursday, except actually Thanksgiving as well as COVID times, but that's for another time. So the meetup definitely has the most amount of money that we've raised. The most amount of investors that continue to invest in our deals comes from the in-person meetup group that we host weekly. However, that is quickly getting surpassed by my podcast. It's funny because the meetups, most people, we talk about know you, like you, trust you. And again, we said the thought leadership gets people to know you. Maybe the social media gets them to like you, and the in-person gets them to trust you. So it makes sense that if you're meeting people in person on a regular basis, they're more likely to do business with you than if they're following you on social media or just listening to your podcast, because they're able to connect with you more. However, only about anywhere from 30 to 100 and maybe sometimes 176 people, that's the most, but usually between 30 and 100 people are coming to the meetup, right? And so that reach, it would mean that if they continue to come, I'll have those 30 people that are my absolute diehard fans. They would follow me anywhere. They would invest in any deal, right? But what's interesting is with the podcast, each and every episode has 3,000 people listening. So that podcast, even though it's less work now, and even though it's a smaller percentage, instead of like 50% of your meetup people investing in your deal, it's like a half of 1% of your podcast listeners investing in your deal. So it's what I'm saying is, if you have enough listeners, then you'll be able to get a ton of investors that way. And since we're now, we were at 2,000, now we're at 3,000. That's because of that, most of our investors are starting to come from the podcast, even though there's a smaller percentage of listeners that are investors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
How do you organize your meetup group? What do you guys do?
Good question. We meet weekly on Thursdays at lunch because we want to be different from other meetups. Other meetups meet at night. Other meetups are $20. Other meetups are about single family, and other meetups meet at I guess maybe I already said it, but in the evening. And so what we do different, or they meet monthly instead of weekly. So we create a niche, our own brand new niche. And so we want to make sure that we're telling our meetup attendees how we're different every single time. So write that down. That's super duper important. Here's how we structure it though. At noon is when we meet, and I write in because notoriously most US states are going to have people that are notoriously late for events. It starts at noon, so everybody shows up at 12:15 or 12:30. So what I do to change that is I send out a message and I say, as a reminder, the 30 minutes before it starts is the best time to network. These are the most active people coming at that time. They are the best people coming. They're the ones who need to partner with you. So those are the three things I say. And I say that the best time to network with them is the 30 minutes before it starts. And I let them know that we start right on time. And that gets them to start thinking, I'm going to try to be early, not late. So when we get there at noon, what we'll do is we make announcements. So I'll do a couple of announcements. And then right after that is done, I will go around the room and let everybody introduce themselves, except when I had 176 people that week. That was the biggest we had. What I did is I said, let's just do haves and wants with a microphone up in the front. And I didn't go around every single person. But when I've got 30 or 60 people, it's totally easy to give people a few seconds to say what they do. So this is important. And this is, if you're going to have a meetup, you've got to follow what I'm about